basic IAD building blocks of narrative is dialogue. To use dialogue effectively, you need to write engaging dialogue, punctuate that dialogue correctly, and paragraph dialogue according to conventional paragraphing rules. But your first task is to write engaging dialogue. It's engaging when it moves the action forward, reveals something about the characters or their relationships, and helps the reader imagine the moment. It's also engaging if it's not just the characters' words, but also their thoughts and actions mixed in. How they say the words, or what they're doing before, during, or after the words also helps the reader imagine the scene. Remember, all the time we're using all of the inner thinking, action, dialogue, and description braided together. So let's remember that punctuating dialogue should help your reader read fluently. The reader needs to know who's saying what, when the character's words begin and end. In a graphic novel or cartoon, the speech bubbles act like quotation marks. You know who's speaking visually. In a written text, you need more clues, and punctuation is the main kind of clue. You have an anchor chart for your notebook that has these rules. Rule number 1, the speaker's exact words go in quotation marks. So everything Jeremy says in that first panel, the words that appear in his speech bubble in the cartoon, need to be in quotation marks. I really need to stop bringing so many books home at once. Now in a text, we'd want to add said Jeremy or Jeremy said at the end there. That's called the dialogue tag. Jeremy said is a dialogue tag. Also, please note that Jeremy's exact words are a sentence that start with a capital letter. So your quoted material always will start with a capital letter. This isn't a great example since the pronoun I is always capitalized, but the rule is capitalize the beginning of the speaker's sentence. If it was in a speech bubble, it would be capitalized. In the next example, Jeremy's dad asked, "Why does your back hurt?" Y is capitalized because in the speech bubble, Y is the first word of the sentence. Rule number 2, punctuation marks, commas, and periods at the end of a sentence always go inside the quotation marks, whether it's before a tag or at the end of the sentence. If the quotation is a question or an exclamation, these punctuation marks also go inside the quotation marks. Okay, rule number 3. There's a comma before or after the tag, usually. The exception is if the tag is after a question mark or an exclamation point, that would be just too much punctuation. So let's look at some examples. In the first panel, I really need to stop bringing so many books home at once. There's a comma after once before said Jeremy. In the third panel, why does your back hurt? Asked Jeremy's dad. There's a question mark after hurt. That's needed because your reader needs to know how to make their voice go up at the end, make it sound like a question. You don't now need a comma also, that's just too much punctuation. You just put ask Jeremy's dad. There's one more level of complexity for punctuation. The dialogue tag can go before, after, or in the middle of the quoted material. And there are subtle distinctions in punctuation. My recommendation is that you pause this video as we go through these and write some model sentences in your notebook. Then you can look back and copy the patterns when you write your own dialogue. I'm using the panel from the graphic novel Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Let's start with the first panel. Nimona's exact words are in the speech bubble, and they will go in quotation marks. We could put a dialogue tag before her words to explain who's speaking. We could say, Nimona exclaimed, comma, quote, "You're Balister Blackheart, the biggest name in supervillainy. You're an inspiration." Yes, there's a comma after the dialogue tag, Nimona exclaimed, and the quote starts with a capital letter. Or we could put the dialogue tag at the end. Note that the exclamation point when we do goes inside the quotation marks. That's rule number 2. And the exclaimed Nimona is lowercase, at least the exclaimed part is, because we're in the middle of our sentence. Or we could put the dialogue tag in the middle between the two sentences that Nimona speaks. "You're Balister Blackheart, the biggest name in supervillainy," Nimona exclaimed. "You're an inspiration." Now, because the first sentence is a complete sentence, there's an exclamation point at the end of it, Nimona exclaimed, and then there's a period because our sentence has ended. "You're an inspiration" is its own sentence just in quotation marks. We don't have a dialogue tag attached to that because it's not a new paragraph. Because we're continuing on the same line, your reader knows that the same person is speaking the second sentence. Your notebook anchor chart has one more rule and a couple of hints. Rule number 4 is a paragraphing rule. One of the many paragraphing rules is new speaker, new paragraph. Every time a new person speaks, you need to go to a new line and indent. And then there's 2 hints. Remember, you can use a better word than said all the time. Use something that expresses more of the way that the person said the words. And you can add the way they think or act while they're talking. So let's look at our Nimona character some more. Nimona exclaimed, "You're Balister Blackheart, the biggest name in supervillainy. You're an inspiration." Nimona clasped Balister's shoulder adoringly, looking eagerly for approval. "Yes, well, I don't need a sidekick," Balister sneered as he pinched her off his shoulder like she was a smelly piece of seaweed. "Oh, come on," retorted Nimona. "Everyone has a sidekick these days." You know of quite a few tools in your narrative toolbox. In your current piece, write some engaging dialogue, punctuate it correctly, and be sure to check your paragraphing of your entire narrative. Good luck. I look forward to reading your pieces.